The Mombasa Republican Council emerged as a significant separatist movement in Kenya's coastal region, reflecting deep-seated historical grievances and calls for self-determination. Formed in 1999, the MRC was established to address what its members perceive as long-standing political and economic discrimination against the inhabitants of the former Coast Province, which includes key areas like Mombasa, Kilifi, and Lamu. The group's origins trace back to colonial-era agreements, particularly the 1895 transfer of the 10-mile coastal strip from the Sultanate of Zanzibar to British control and the 1963 Memorandum of Understanding at Independence, which integrated the region into Kenya. MRC leaders argued that these pacts were imposed without the consent of local stakeholders and failed to safeguard the rights and resources of coastal communities, leading to marginalization by successive Kenyan governments based in Nairobi.
The MRC's core slogan, Pwani si Kenya, the coast is not Kenya, encapsulates its demand for secession and the establishment of an independent coastal republic. While the organization claims to represent a diverse coalition of tribes and religions, including both Muslims and Christians, it has garnered support from groups like the Organization of Emerging African States, OEAS, which views the MRC's push as a legitimate exercise of self-determination under the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Initially, the MRC pursued nonviolent strategies, focusing on legal advocacy and public mobilization. However, its activities have intensified around election periods, such as in 2013 and 2022, often involving protests, boycotts, and oath-taking ceremonies rooted in local traditions for unity and secrecy. The group has consistently denied any affiliations with extremist organizations like Al-Shabaab, emphasizing its focus on regional autonomy rather than radical ideology.
From a legal standpoint, the MRC's separatist agenda has clashed repeatedly with Kenya's constitutional framework, which emphasizes national unity and territorial integrity. The Kenyan Constitution, particularly its preamble in Article 10, declares the country an indivisible sovereign state, leaving no room for secessionist movements. In 2008, the government banned the MRC, classifying it as an illegal organization under the Prevention of Organized Crimes Act, alongside other groups deemed threats to public order. This ban was part of a broader crackdown in 2010, prompted by the MRC's growing calls for independence. The MRC challenged these restrictions through the courts, achieving a notable victory in 2012 when the High Court in Mombasa ruled the ban unconstitutional. In the case of Randun Zai Rua and two others versus the Internal Security Minister in another, the court affirmed that labeling the MRC as a criminal group violated fundamental rights and Articles 36, freedom of association, 37, assembly, 38, political rights, 40, property, and 47, fair administrative action of the 2010 Constitution. The judges recognized the MRC as a political movement and suggested it pursue its goals through legitimate channels, such as registering as a political party. However, subsequent rulings complicated this status. Another court later determined that the MRC was not operating as a legally registered society, rendering its activities unlawful.
Despite the 2012 ruling, the government has continued to impose restrictions, including arrests of leaders like Omar Mwanwadi in 2014 for illegal gatherings and over 80 members in 2022 for oath-taking ceremonies aimed at challenging national leadership. These actions highlight the tension between the MRC's right to advocate for change and the state's imperative to maintain sovereignty, often leading to renewed bans and investigations into alleged funding from politicians and businessmen. Legally, the MRC's insistence on secession remains untenable under current Kenyan law, pushing it towards potential devolution mechanisms introduced in the 2010 Constitution as an alternative to outright independence.
The MRC's activities and the government's responses have raised significant human rights concerns, underscoring issues of freedom of expression, assembly, and protection from state violence. Human rights organizations have documented instances where security forces conducted raids on MRC offices and members' homes, denied meeting permits, and engaged in arbitrary arrests, framing the group as a violent extremist or terrorist entity despite its denials of such affiliations. In 2012, following an attack blamed on the MRC, police arrested over 40 members and killed several during operations, actions criticized as excessive and potentially amounting to extrajudicial killings. These crackdowns echo broader patterns of human rights violations in Kenya's coastal region, including enforced disappearances and interference with privacy, as reported in contexts like the 2013 U.S. State Department's Human Rights Report. The MRC's use of traditional oath-taking ceremonies has also led to violent confrontations. For instance, a 2012 ceremony in Kaloleni resulted in lynchings and police interventions, raising questions about cultural rights versus public safety. Critics argue that the government's heavy-handed approach risks radicalizing the group, transforming legitimate grievances into more extreme responses, similar to other African movements like Boko Haram. On the other hand, the MRC has been accused of recruiting children, conducting illegal military training, and inciting violence, particularly around elections, which could infringe on the rights of non-supporters in the region. International frameworks such as the African Charter support self-determination, but emphasize peaceful means, placing the onus on both the state and the MRC to resolve disputes without violating human rights. Ultimately, addressing underlying issues like marginalization is seen as key to preventing further abuses.
Societally, the MRC embodies the frustrations of Kenya's coastal communities, where economic disparities, land dispossession, and underdevelopment have fueled a sense of alienation from the national identity. The region, rich in tourism and port resources, contributes significantly to Kenya's economy, yet suffers from high poverty, unemployment, and social ills like drug abuse and sex work among youth. While not all residents endorse secession, many sympathize with the MRC's grievances over historical land grabs and lack of investment, viewing the group as a voice against up-country dominance. The MRC's loose structure and youth wing have led to societal divisions, with some activities alienating civil society organizations and moderate voices by rejecting broader coalitions. Election-related violence attributed to the group, such as machete attacks and clashes in areas like Tana River, has disrupted communities, exacerbating ethnic tensions and hindering voter participation. Studies indicate that MRC's alleged criminal activities have negatively impacted households' social and economic activities, contributing to insecurity and economic stagnation in affected areas. Politically, the MRC risks being manipulated as a pawn by elites seeking electoral advantages, potentially funding violence to sway outcomes. This dynamic perpetuates cycles of marginalization and social exclusion, as seen in indicators like youth unrest and intercommunal conflicts. However, the movement has also fostered a renewed sense of coastal identity, prompting discussions on devolution as a pathway to inclusive growth and reducing the appeal of separatism. In conclusion, the MRC's story highlights the complexities of balancing national unity with regional aspirations in Kenya. While its demands stem from historical injustices, the path forward lies in dialogue, legal reforms, and equitable development to mitigate human rights risks and societal fractures.
Thank you for watching. If our video resonated with you, please consider liking and subscribing to stay updated. Join our community in the comments to share your insights and foster discussions that drive positive change. See you next time.